Morning, everyone.
Morning.
From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have executed our mission to put people over politics and to fight for lower costs, to grow the middle class, and defend freedom, particularly a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. We have repeatedly made clear and demonstrated our willingness to find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, in order to make life better for the American people and to deliver real results and solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers. House Democrats are temporarily in the minority, but have repeatedly governed as if we are in the majority, because we recognize that our job is to deliver for the American people in blue states, red states, and purple states. That's our job. And all we've asked for is that traditional Republicans break with the MAGA extremists in their party to partner with us in order to get things done. Once again, we find ourselves at another fork in the road. Extreme MAGA Republicans want to shut down the government because they are determined to jam Trump's Project 2025 down the throats of the American people and enact extreme cuts to veterans, to Social Security, and to disaster relief in a manner that will hurt the American people. We are simply asking traditional Republicans to partner with House Democrats in a bipartisan way to find the common ground necessary to avoid a Donald Trump-inspired extreme MAGA Republican shutdown. That's not too much to ask, particularly when we've already reached, through the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act, a spending framework for the upcoming fiscal year. Questions? Alan?
The Department of Homeland Security designated January 6th certification as a national special security event for the first time. I wonder if you could talk about, broadly any concerns that you have as that date gets closer, and how Democrats are preparing for certification when it's not certain that some Republicans will do it.
Well, House Democrats are committed to protecting the democracy. We're committed to free and fair elections, and we're committed to the peaceful transfer of power that will begin on January 6th. In that regard, our focus at the moment on the non-governmental side is just to make sure that the people who are elected on November 5th actually believe in American democracy and are not election deniers. That's the clearest path forward for any American who is concerned that there are some in this country, led by the former president, who continue to deny elections, refuse to acknowledge that Donald Trump lost in 2020, and perhaps are prepared to undermine the peaceful transfer of power on January 6th of next year.
Was that designation necessary?
The designation was made by the Biden administration and the Department of Homeland Security, evaluating both what happened on January 6, 2021, which was a disgrace to the United States of America when a mob of violent individuals were incited by Donald Trump and extreme MAGA Republicans to attack the Capitol, seriously injuring 140 officers who were defending the Congress, the Capitol, and the Constitution, and yet refuse to apologize or acknowledge fault in connection with a day in American history, January 6th, that will live in infamy. And so, yes, I think evaluating the facts, both in terms of what happened on January 6th and the refusal by many extreme MAGA Republicans to stop something like that from ever happening again, that this designation by national security professionals seems to have been necessary.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I know that you want to approve CR, but now that Speaker Johnson has to go back to the drawing board, do you think Democrats are open at all to a shorter CR with the SAVE Act? Do you think some Democrats could be picked up?
We have zero interest in enacting any part of Trump's Project 2025 agenda. The American people want no part of Trump's Project 2025 agenda, and so the fact that House Republicans are threatening a shutdown and demanding, in exchange for keeping the government open, the enactment of deeply dangerous and unpopular parts of Trump's Project 2025 agenda is unserious and unacceptable. If they were serious about what they intend to do, then pass the bill themselves. But they've been unable to do that on their own. In fact, can anyone in America name a single thing that House Republicans have been able to do on their own to make a difference in the lives of the American people? A single thing that House Republicans have been able to do on their own? It can't. Why? Because the House Republican agenda is all about a national abortion ban, Trump's Project 2025, and big tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and big corporations. That's the House Republican agenda. And it's deeply unpopular with the American people. Extreme MAGA Republicans are unable to govern on their own. And House Democrats are simply saying, we're willing to partner with you in a bipartisan path forward based on the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act that was passed by both houses of Congress with Democratic and Republican majorities, signed into law by President Joe Biden, and sets top-line spending numbers for fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025. What's the problem? We've already reached an agreement, and the extreme MAGA Republicans are walking away from the agreement that they themselves demanded that we negotiate in order to avoid a catastrophic default on America's debt. So, it should not be that complicated, and we need to get this resolved in this calendar year. And if we just let the appropriators do their work, led by Rosa DeLauro on our side, I'm confident that we can reach a bipartisan agreement consistent with the Fiscal Responsibility Act that meets the needs of the American people and keeps the government open. Back row? You got it. Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate it. Just following up on that, you just mentioned you want to get this resolved in this calendar year. Does that mean that you would oppose any CR that's 6 months? And if so, why do you want it this calendar year, not pushing the next year?
It means we want to get it resolved this calendar year because that's the only practical way to meet the needs of the American people. The Republican so-called clean continuing resolution cuts veterans' health care by $12 billion. It shortchanges our military readiness by $6 billion. It will result in the elimination of at least 2,000 jobs, it appears, from the Social Security Administration, and undermine Social Security as we know it, and it will shortchange disaster assistance by about $25 billion in terms of Americans in every state who've been impacted by extreme weather events. That's unacceptable. These are extreme cuts that are inspired by Trump's Project 2025. And the American people don't want any part of it, and neither do House Democrats. The only way to avoid that is to resolve the fiscal year 2025 spending agreement in this calendar year.
There's 2 working weeks left in this session. Do the 4 corners have any plans to meet on spending, or do you intend to ask for the 4 corners?
I remain in regular communication with Leader Schumer in the White House about finding a path forward, and we are always ready to sit down and have a 4 corners bipartisan discussion so we can keep the government open and meet the needs of the American people in a serious and responsible way in terms of their health, their safety, their national security, and their economic well-being. This is not complicated. We have already resolved the top-line spending issue in the context of the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act. And so the extreme MAGA Republicans just have to walk away from Trump's Project 2025, walk away from their obsession in trying to once again shut down the government, and walk away from their willingness to criminalize abortion care and impose a nationwide ban. That's why we're in the situation that we are in right now. The overwhelming majority of the American people agree with us, and we're fighting for you.
We're talking about divisions here, but let me talk a little bit about bipartisan cohesion here. The China Committee, a number of bills on the floor this week, that committee has generally worked in a bipartisan fashion. What are the things, however, that you might be disappointed in, that you would have liked to have seen them do better, or go further? And you think that some of the things, some of the interests that Republicans have in these issues regarding China are steeped in racism or gender?
It seems to me that throughout much of this Congress, the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party has worked in a constructive fashion. Unfortunately, many of the bills that have been on the floor this week have been more connected to xenophobic efforts by extreme MAGA Republicans to try to divide the country as opposed to trying to unite the country. This is not an unfamiliar thing. More than 60 million Americans saw the contrast between the Vice President's vision for America and the former President's vision for America on full display. We as Democrats, led by President Biden and Vice President Harris, want to move the country forward, bring people together, and solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers. Extreme MAGA Republicans, led by the former president, who continues to order members of the House Republican Conference around, and in sycophantic fashion, many of them continue to fall in line, are trying to turn back the clock, divide America, and exercise complete control over the American people through Trump's Project 2025 agenda. That's a clear vision. So whatever happens on the House floor this week, next week, the week thereafter, should be viewed in that context.
I know you want a bipartisan solution to this, but I'm just saying that's what some Republican shutdown. Are you predicting a shutdown at this point into this?
The American people should be very concerned that extreme MAGA Republicans once again want to shut down the government. That concern is anchored in Republican history in shutting down the government. In the 1990s, under former Speaker Newt Gingrich, House Republicans shut the government down to try to end Medicare and Medicaid as we know it. They failed after shutting down the government. In 2013, House Republicans, inspired by Ted Cruz and the Tea Party, shut the government down for 14 days because they wanted Democrats to repeal completely the Affordable Care Act. Democrats. In fact, they demanded that President Obama repeal his signature legislative accomplishment that's helping tens of millions of people, including more than 100 million people with pre-existing conditions. The Republicans shut the government down, led by House Republicans here in Congress, and they failed. 2018, Donald Trump, Republicans in the House and the Senate shut the government down for 35 days, the longest shutdown in American history, because they wanted taxpayers to fund Trump's medieval border wall. Wait a second, didn't you say that Mexico was going to pay for that wall? So they shut the government down for 35 days. Hurt everyday Americans. All of these shutdowns hurt everyday Americans. So they've now done it 3 different times to try to enact their extreme agenda. Because the commonality is it's done by Republicans. Why? Because they have put on the table an extreme ransom demand that they want to jam down the throats of the American people. So it's not hyperbole, hysteria, or a hypothetical to suggest that House Republicans may try to shut the government down. It's the reality. It's what the American people face right now. And we're going to aggressively push back against it. Yep.
Yesterday, on 9/11, word of America was spread in 9/11 conspiracy theories. Spent part of the day with Donald Trump. How do you work on it?
It was shocking and irresponsible and offensive to the thousands of people who lost their lives on September 11th, including hundreds of brave first responders, members of the NYPD, FDNY, and others who raced toward the danger in order to help people escape the danger and lost their lives as a result of it. Donald Trump is a conspiracy theory peddling, racial arsonist, and pathological liar. That's just the reality of the situation. And it's being visited upon the American people. And the fact that on September 11th, this sacred day, he would bring a 9/11 conspiracy theorist to participate in events during this solemn commemoration should shock the conscience of all decent Americans, and I believe that it does just that. Let's be clear. Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden are responsible for the horrors of September 11th. No one else. No one else. No one else.
Back on the CR real quick. You've been in touch with Leader Schumer in the White House. Have you spoken with Speaker Johnson about a resolution about the way out of this thing? And secondly, at what point, if he cannot get something on the floor and pass, does the Senate have to pick up this issue and work on something over there?
Yeah, Speaker Johnson and I were together yesterday at 2 different events. We had a brief conversation about trying to find, a path forward, but we haven't had any formal discussions in that regard. Our staffs do maintain regular communication. We were all waiting to see what happened on the floor yesterday in terms of the reckless and extreme Republican proposal that failed because it doesn't even have sufficient support in the House Republican Conference. Why? It's not extreme enough for some individuals. The only path forward is a bipartisan one, and I'm hopeful that House Republican leadership and traditional Republicans will reach that conclusion sooner rather than later so we can get the job done. We look forward to partnering with our colleagues in the Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, in terms of Leader Schumer and Leader McConnell, but we need House Republicans to come to the table.
Is it going to have to originate in the Senate?
That remains to be seen.
You've seen a lot of recent ads from House Republicans pushing back on Democratic attacks on abortion rights, saying that they don't want to ban abortion nationwide, but they support IVF. I'm curious your response to Republicans trying to distance themselves from some of their more politically toxic beliefs.
Street-bank Republicans are on the run because they know they have gone too far. But they are lying to the American people when it comes to reproductive freedom. And the American people understand it. Kamala Harris, Senate Democrats, House Democrats, support a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. We support family planning. We support access to birth control. And we support IVF. Donald Trump and House Republicans detonated Roe v. Wade and created a circumstance in America, as articulately and powerfully outlined by Vice President Kamala Harris on numerous occasions, where reproductive freedom has been ripped away from tens of millions of women in America, and they want it to continue. Trump's Project 2025 is in part about surveillance of the pregnancies and miscarriages of women in the United States of America. If you want to surveil women in this country and their pregnancies and their miscarriages and their health conditions related to reproductive events in their life, why do you want to do it? It's because at the end of the day, Republicans want to criminalize abortion care, impose a nationwide abortion ban, enact government-mandated pregnancies, and outlaw access to things like birth control and in vitro fertilization. Donald Trump doesn't even know what IVF stands for, and we saw that the other day. He doesn't even know what IVF stands for. And we're supposed to believe that they're champions in this area? It's laughable.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. In her Taylor Swift's Instagram post endorsing Kamala Harris, she mentioned artificial intelligence inspired misinformation for her reasons for supporting the vice president. A lot of, and even Oprah Sanaya is hosting a primetime special on artificial intelligence. It's a huge issue in society right now. But a lot of the artificial intelligence federal policy has been established by executive actions in the Biden administration, not much in Congress. What do you say to Americans out there who are frustrated that the legislative process isn't keeping up with innovation? And if House Democrats take back the majority, will that be a priority? Will artificial intelligence regulation be a priority for House Democrats and the majority next Congress?
Artificial intelligence and its explosive rise holds great promise, great opportunity to make a difference in the lives of everyday Americans, but also there's significant downsides to the extent that bad actors can abuse this new technology, as has been the case for centuries, in order to undermine the societal good. So Congress does have a role in working with industry stakeholders to figure out how do we strike the right balance between making sure that American dominance in the field of artificial intelligence can continue so that we can make strides for the American people, particularly in areas like medical innovation, solving chronic disease and terminal illnesses, while at the same time figuring out what are the right guardrails to prevent bad actors from entering into this space, including foreign actors, to hurt the American people. We currently are engaged in a pretty thoughtful exploration that is bipartisan in nature. I commend Speaker Johnson and Republicans for partnering with Democrats in this regard through the Artificial Intelligence Task Force that's evenly divided, led by Ted Lieu on our side. And we hope that it will yield some constructive recommendations, perhaps by the end of the year, that can then lead to legislative action in the future. Okay? Last two questions.
Thank you, Leader. On the SAVE Act, two questions about that. The other day, Speaker Johnson was up here at City
proof of citizenship and documentation, how do you feel it's possible to have an accurate sense of whether it is happening on a basis?
Constitution does not permit non-citizens to vote, period, full stop. Extreme MAGA Republicans have zero credibility and zero legitimacy when it comes to free and fair elections in the United States of America and the peaceful transfer of power. We will not be lectured. We will not allow the American people to be lectured by election deniers on the integrity of elections in the United States of America.
Leader Jeffries, reflecting on both of the billboards you had, Republican shutdown, but is there still a concern that, as you call hardcore Republicans, are going to try and twist the message as the deadline gets closer, putting the blame on Democrats, and then looking on the other billboard, hurt the middle class is obviously one of the big points that Democrats bring up when it comes to Project 2025. When we've spoken to New Yorkers out of both Suffolk and Nassau County, however, they still are under the impression saying that Democrats are the ones who will hurt the middle class. What is the message that you want to get across to those voters, especially when it comes to these high-pressure situations like the possible shutdown, or Democrats' message saying that Republicans are the ones who will hurt the middle class?
Extreme MAGA Republicans over the years have repeatedly shut down the government, not House Democrats. And House Republicans are determined to shut down the government again. They have never successfully been able to persuade the American people that anyone other than themselves is responsible for a government shutdown. Why in the world should we have any concern that in this particular instance, when on their own in this Congress, House Republicans have produced nothing but chaos, dysfunction, and extremism, that this time will be different? When the facts are so clear that you have a previously agreed upon bipartisan fiscal responsibility act that actually sets spending numbers for the upcoming fiscal year, and extreme MAGA Republicans are walking away from their own agreement because they're determined to shut down the government. Why won't Mike Lawler or other so-called traditional Republicans stand up against the extremists in their party to do the right thing for the American people? That's the question that's going to be asked in the suburbs of New York City, in the Hudson Valley, in the central New York region, and in many parts of California and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you.